My mom decided to attend my brother's anniversary party instead of my wedding because she deemed it more important. However, when my grandfather confronted her about it, she suggested we redo the wedding to fix things. My mother has always shown favoritism toward my older brother Marvin, a fact she's never hidden from me. I've never fully understood why Marvin is her favorite, but she's adored him since we were kids. When I was born, just a year after Marvin, my parents decided to have my grandparents raise me for the first 8 years of my life. My mom found it overwhelming to care for both of us, especially while dealing with postpartum depression. My grandparents didn't resist the decision, understanding the severity of her condition, and my dad couldn't manage both work and childcare. As a baby, I had no idea my grandparents weren't my real parents. I grew up in their loving, nurturing home, feeling safe and happy. But things began to change as I got older and started to understand the world around me. My parents would visit occasionally, explaining that they were my real parents and that my time with my grandparents was only temporary. These visits were bittersweet. While I was excited to see them, I also felt a sense of confusion and abandonment. They'd play with me for a couple of hours and then leave, always taking Marvin back home with them. It became clear that Marvin was their priority. My grandparents gave me all the love they could, but those fleeting visits from my parents left me feeling unwanted. When I turned 8, my parents brought me back home. At first, I was thrilled to finally be with my family. But that excitement quickly faded as I realized how much better my life had been with my grandparents. One of the first challenges was sharing a room with Marvin. He'd always had his own room, and while there was a spare room available, my parents insisted we share to bond as brothers. Marvin hated this arrangement and made it known. If I played too loudly or read comics my grandparents had given me, Marvin would call me a brat or a weirdo. When I tried to decorate my side of the room with superhero drawings and posters, he mocked me for being childish. If I brought home good grades and showed them excitedly to my parents, Marvin rolled his eyes and sarcastically called me the teacher's pet. Even when I practiced playing the keyboard, a gift from my grandparents, Marvin would tell me I sounded terrible and should give up. Every little thing I did became a source of ridicule. He called me names like nerd or dummy whenever I showed interest in reading or learning. Over time, I started to feel self-conscious about the things I loved. Imagine having an older brother, someone you're supposed to look up to, constantly putting you down. It made me doubt myself. I was too young to realize Marvin's behavior was a form of bullying. I thought maybe I was the problem. Desperate to fit in with my family, I stopped reading my comics at home and only read them in the school library. I quit playing the keyboard entirely. I did all of this, hoping that maybe, just maybe, my brother would accept me if I changed. Unfortunately, no matter how much I tried to adapt and fit in, Marvin's attitude toward me never improved. The more I tried to please him, the more I felt like I was losing pieces of myself. Even after giving up the things that annoyed Marvin, he found new ways to tease me. I had a skin condition during childhood that caused acne, and Marvin constantly called me ugly and said my face was disgusting. Hearing that was so hurtful that I often cried and went to my parents for comfort. Instead of supporting me and reprimanding Marvin, my mom told me to stop crying and be a man. My dad stayed out of it, telling me to handle it on my own. My mom insisted I confront my brother instead of coming to her. Marvin's bullying and my parents' inability to make me feel safe and loved left me confused and isolated. I longed for the warm, supportive environment I'd had with my grandparents, where I had always felt valued and understood. My grandparents visited me whenever they could and gently tried to reason with Marvin, asking him to stop bothering me. But Marvin never listened, leaving me to deal with everything on my own. As I grew older, I slowly turned into a very angry teenager. I was starting to outgrow Marvin in height, even though he was older, and he didn't like that at all. He began teasing me about my height, calling me names like Giant or Slender Man. But this time, I fought back. I called him Shrimp and would hide his books on the highest shelves or on top of the wardrobe where he couldn't reach them without a chair. It gave me an excuse to tease him in return. He would complain to our parents, and sometimes I got scolded for it, but I felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt for standing up for myself. Though it felt good to defend myself, it also meant our home became even more hostile. The fights between us grew more frequent and intense, with neither of us willing to back down. The breaking point came during my school's annual awards ceremony. I had poured my heart into my studies and was about to receive the top award in my class. I desperately wanted my parents' support and presence, hoping to feel their pride and encouragement. But a few days before the ceremony, my mom told me Marvin had a swimming competition scheduled for the same day. Even though the events were hours apart, Marvin wanted to focus on his preparation, and according to my mom, he needed her more. She assured me my dad would be there for me. Although I was disappointed, I accepted that at least one parent would be there. But on the day of the ceremony, my dad didn't show up either. At the last moment, my mom called him, saying Marvin was having a panic attack before his competition and needed him. So my dad rushed to Marvin's side instead. I remember walking onto the stage to receive my award, scanning the crowd for a familiar face, but there was no one there for me. When I got home, my parents and Marvin were still out. I called them, only to find out they were still with Marvin, celebrating his victory. Hours later, they came home, jubilant, with Marvin holding a trophy. My parents were beaming with pride, hugging him tightly and praising his accomplishment as if it were the highlight of the year. I stood there, holding my own award, feeling crushed. They didn't even apologize for missing my ceremony. It became painfully clear where I stood in their priorities. No matter how hard I worked or what I achieved, I was always in Marvin's shadow, unappreciated and overlooked. That moment was a turning point for me. I stopped expecting my parents to support me or to be present for me. I stopped sharing my accomplishments with them. Whenever I succeeded in academics or sports, I didn't bother to tell them. The only people I could freely talk to about my achievements were my grandparents, and they always appreciated even the smallest things I did. Their words meant more to me than any acknowledgement I could have received from my parents. When Marvin graduated high school and was accepted into a university, my parents threw a grand celebration. They were brimming with pride, showing off his achievements and hosting a party in his honor. I joined in the celebrations, genuinely happy for my brother. A year later, when I graduated high school and was accepted into a university, my parents didn't do anything similar. Seeing this, my grandparents decided to celebrate my achievement by organizing a small gathering with close relatives and a few of my friends. Initially intended to be modest, word spread, and more relatives and friends expressed their desire to join and support me. However, my parents disapproved of the idea, thinking it was over the top. They felt I didn't deserve such a lavish celebration, especially since my grandparents hadn't done the same for Marvin when he graduated. Admittedly, the party my grandparents were planning for me was more extravagant than the one Marvin had, but I wish my parents could just let me have one day without complaints. My mom argued that Marvin would feel bad if he found out about the celebration, pointing out that my grandparents had only given him a watch when he graduated. My grandfather, visibly upset, reminded her how he and my grandmother always stepped in to support and celebrate me because my parents never did. He pointed out the enthusiasm my parents showed for Marvin's achievements and their indifference toward mine. My grandmother added her frustration, questioning the double standard in celebrating their children's successes. In response, my parents defended themselves, saying it was challenging to balance celebrations for two children and that their focus had naturally been on Marvin, the eldest. They claimed they couldn't do everything equally for both of us. My mom even insisted that not celebrating me enough didn't mean they didn't love me, a statement that sounded laughable to me. Fortunately, my grandfather felt the same and wasn't convinced. He passionately argued that being a parent meant being there for all your children, not just one. He criticized my parents for not treating me with the same enthusiasm and support they showed Marvin. In the end, my parents couldn't counter his arguments, and I had the big party my grandparents wanted for me. I invited Marvin to attend, but he dismissed it, saying he was too busy to go to a silly little party. For years, my parents continued showing favoritism toward Marvin, even during our university years. This favoritism became especially evident in how they treated our partners. Marvin and his girlfriend were always warmly welcomed at family gatherings. I, on the other hand, felt increasingly excluded, especially after I started dating my girlfriend, Claudia. Every Christmas, my parents sent invitations to Marvin and his girlfriend without fail. But after I introduced them to Claudia, they suddenly had concerns about the gatherings being too crowded if she came too. What made it worse was their attitude toward Claudia. Despite her impressive academic achievements and successful career, they always found something to criticize about her, which infuriated me. Meanwhile, Marvin's girlfriend, who didn't work and relied on alimony from her ex-husband, was never questioned or judged. My mom's comments about Claudia were particularly hurtful. She once told me she wished I'd chosen a more traditional housewife type instead of someone so career-focused. She even suggested that Claudia wouldn't make a good mother to my future children. Despite her remarks, I stayed with Claudia because I believed in her and our future together. I even stopped attending family dinners and Christmas events to avoid giving my parents any reason to criticize her. My absence didn't seem to bother them much. Now this brings me to the main story about why I'm here on Reddit. 6 months ago, I proposed to Claudia, and she said yes. I had no doubt that she was the one for me. She has given me so much love and support over the years that I can't imagine my life without her. When I informed my parents about the engagement out of courtesy, so they'd hear the news from me instead of someone else, their reactions were mixed. My dad seemed genuinely happy for me and congratulated me. My mom, however, stayed silent. Later, she texted me to express her disappointment. She said she was upset that I hadn't listened to her and had gone through with the proposal to Claudia. She claimed that, as a woman, she understood other women better and felt that Claudia wouldn't fit into our family. I was stunned. I told her to stop bothering me because I was tired of her constant criticism of my relationship. I asked if she had any legitimate reasons for disliking Claudia or if it was just baseless prejudice. Her response stunned me. She said Claudia always talked back, unlike Marvin's girlfriend. I was speechless. It was true that Claudia never let anyone walk over her. Whenever my mom made subtle jabs about her education, her outfit, or her career, Claudia didn't let it slide. This is one of the things I admire most about Claudia. She stands up for herself. She knows the dynamics of my family and, unlike me, doesn't hesitate to confront my mother. However, Claudia has never been overtly disrespectful. Her responses are usually witty and sarcastic, but it's clear my mother has resented Claudia for this the entire time. It became obvious that my mom's problem with Claudia wasn't based on any real behavior or character flaw, but rather on outdated expectations of how she thought a woman should behave. I told my mom I didn't believe Claudia had done anything wrong, and that I wished I could be as assertive as her. My mom dismissed this, claiming Claudia was a bad influence and that she was changing me too much. I ignored my mom's criticisms and continued enthusiastically planning my wedding with Claudia. 2 months ago, I sent out wedding invitations to everyone, including Marvin. Even though Marvin hadn't congratulated me on the engagement, I held no grudges and invited him to the wedding. To my surprise, Marvin declined the invitation without giving an explanation. While I was slightly disappointed, what shocked me more was when my dad called to inform me that, although he would attend, my mom had decided not to come. I knew my mom had reservations about Claudia, but I had hoped she would set them aside for the sake of our family and my special day. Stunned, I asked why. My dad explained that Marvin had apparently planned an anniversary party for his girlfriend on the same day, and my mom had chosen to attend that instead of my wedding. This revelation baffled me, as I had seen on social media that Marvin and his girlfriend had recently celebrated their anniversary. I couldn't understand why they would throw another party on the same day as my wedding. Rather than confronting my mom first, I decided to call Marvin directly to clarify the situation. Though we didn't talk often, I wanted to handle this respectfully. When I asked him about the anniversary party and whether it was the reason he wasn't attending my wedding, Marvin confirmed it. He explained that he and his girlfriend had originally wanted to throw a party for their anniversary, but hadn't had the money saved up at the time. Marvin admitted he had worked hard to save up and secure a special venue, but unfortunately, the only available date was the same as my wedding. I expressed my disappointment and politely suggested he could have chosen a different date, emphasizing how much I would have appreciated his presence at my wedding. Marvin, however, responded that his girlfriend's happiness was his top priority and made it clear he wouldn't change the date just to accommodate my plans. His words hurt, and I ended the call without waiting for a reply. When I called my mom to discuss the situation, she fell back on the same excuses she always used. She insisted Marvin would be upset if she didn't attend his party and reminded me that my dad was already planning to be at my wedding. She told me I was being selfish for expecting her to attend as well. I told her she was free to do as she wished, but from that moment on, I no longer considered her my mother. She mocked my words, accusing me of being dramatic about my wedding. After that confrontation, I decided to cut off communication with my mom entirely. My main focus became ensuring that Claudia had the most beautiful wedding possible and that our celebration was filled with love and joy. Despite my disappointment with my mom, I was grateful my dad kept his promise and stood by my side on my special day. When Claudia and I finally got married, my grandparents, who had anticipated my mom's absence despite pleading with her to attend, were understandably upset. They had emphasized to her beforehand how important her presence was, yet she still decided not to come. What made matters worse was when my brother posted photos from his anniversary party. In those pictures, my mother was seen dancing and drinking as if she didn't have a care in the world. She didn't call me or Claudia, not to check in or even to congratulate us, the entire day of the wedding. My grandparents were furious. They didn't hold back when confronting her about her absence. They told her they were sick of how she had mistreated me for years and made it clear they had given her more than enough chances to be a better mother. They accused her of only caring about Marvin and even went as far as threatening to remove her from their inheritance. When my mother argued, saying Marvin's party was also important, my grandparents doubled down. They told her they would ensure every penny of their inheritance went to me, as I was more deserving than her. This gesture from my grandparents was both surprising and overwhelming. Shortly after their confrontation, my mother called me, begging for forgiveness. However, during our brief conversation, it became clear her focus was on the inheritance rather than repairing our relationship. She lamented how unfair it would be for me to inherit everything from my grandparents and tried to persuade me to convince them not to make any changes to their will. At the time, I was on my honeymoon and didn't want to ruin the mood. I kept the conversation short as Claudia and I were about to head to the beach. When Claudia was ready, I simply ended the call. Since returning from our honeymoon, my mother has been calling almost daily, pleading for another chance to fix things. She even suggested that Claudia and I hold another wedding, this time with just close family so she could attend. She expressed regret for missing the original wedding and insisted she deserved the chance to make amends. Out of nowhere, Marvin also texted me. He criticized me for involving our grandparents in private family matters and said that our mother was genuinely afraid of losing her inheritance. He suggested I organize another wedding to restore peace in the family, saying it would be for her sake. I'm baffled by the audacity of their suggestion. Holding another wedding just to solve their issues is absurd. Update 1. I spoke with Claudia about the situation, and she agrees that organizing another wedding would be overly complicated and unnecessary. She believes I should stand my ground with my mom and tell her that she had the chance to attend our original wedding, but chose not to. Now, she must live with that decision. Let me clarify a few things. First, despite the favoritism I've experienced from my parents, especially my mom, toward my brother, I don't harbor hatred toward him. I understand that he observed and learned from how our parents treated us differently. While my mom clearly favored him, I think he took advantage of that dynamic. As an adult, I prefer to address and resolve issues rather than hold on to resentment. However, it seems my brother enjoys immature behavior and playing petty games. Second, my grandparents have decided to leave their entire inheritance to me, not to my mom or Marvin. We've developed a close bond because they practically raised me, and they want to ensure I'm cared for regardless of how my parents continue to support Marvin. With no aunts or uncles in the picture, there aren't many others they could leave it to. Lastly, it's worth noting that my mom faced criticism from other family members, including my grandparents, for not attending my wedding. Initially, she seemed indifferent to their concerns. Update 2. It was only after my grandparents revised their wills, naming me as their sole heir and excluding her entirely, that she started changing her approach. My grandfather explained that their decision was influenced not just by how my mom treated me, but also by their trust that I would care for them in their old age better than she would. They believe I wouldn't abandon them in a care facility unless absolutely necessary, and trust me to handle their finances responsibly. I'm deeply moved by their love and support, especially since I often felt like a lower priority for my own parents. As you can imagine, this news hasn't gone over well with my mom. She's been calling and messaging me incessantly, accusing me of blindsiding her and claiming I have no right to inherit anything from her parents. It's true what they say. Money can really change people. She seems to think I'm stealing something from her, even though I haven't received anything yet. When I firmly suggested she take up her concerns directly with my grandparents, she accused me of manipulating them to favor me. I reminded her that any changes to their wills were a direct consequence of her own actions over the years. Our argument escalated, and in a moment of raw honesty, or perhaps malice, she confessed something deeply painful. She told me she wished I had never been born, revealing that I was an unplanned pregnancy and blaming me for causing her postpartum depression. She admitted that she had considered putting me up for adoption, but decided against it due to her parents' conservative views. She confessed she loved Marvin more because he was easier to deal with. Her words hurt deeply, but I told her I appreciated her honesty because it freed me from feeling guilty about our strained relationship. I made it clear I didn't want to continue a cycle of toxic exchanges and simply wanted to live my life in peace. I firmly instructed her not to contact me again and warned that I would involve the police if she ever showed up at my door uninvited. After that conversation, I reached out to my dad. He admitted that some of what my mom said about my unplanned birth and her postpartum struggles was true, but assured me he never regretted having me. I shared how much their favoritism toward my brother had hurt me over the years, and he offered a sincere apology. While I'm unsure about the future of my relationship with him, I've asked for some space, which he has respected. As for Marvin, I sent him a long message expressing how he could have been a better and more mature older brother to me, especially considering how much I admired him growing up. I opened up about how lonely I felt living with our grandparents and how much I longed for his acceptance when I moved in with our parents. I made it clear I've never harbored envy toward him and that instead of competing with me, he could have chosen to be a supportive part of my life. I also expressed my disappointment in him as a brother and informed him that I would be ending our relationship. Since then, I've blocked him and have no plans to unblock him anytime soon. Right now, I'm focused on building a beautiful future with my wife, Claudia. I'm incredibly grateful to have such a determined and loving partner. Her support has been pivotal in my life, and with her by my side, I feel ready to face whatever challenges come our way. So update 3. It's been about 4 or 5 months since my last update, so here's what's new in my life. I haven't heard much from my brother since I've blocked him, and my relatives haven't mentioned him either. I assume nothing significant has happened in his life. As for my dad, I haven't spoken to him at all during this time. I haven't missed him, and I don't think I need a relationship with him anymore. Some people in the comments pointed out that he was complicit in everything that happened, and they're right. That's why I haven't reached out to him again. Regarding my mom, she's been making posts about me on social media. Every time she does, I temporarily unblock her so I can comment and set the record straight, then block her again. The funny part? My comments get more likes than her posts, so I know people are on my side. In fact, many people now reply to her on my behalf, so I don't even have to put in the effort. On the brighter side, my grandparents have also stopped speaking to my parents. I see them every weekend when my wife and I go over for dinner. It's been such a blessing to spend time with them regularly, and I'm grateful for their love and support. Life feels calmer and more stable now.